I just discovered that my microphone had magically turned itself off. Isn't that great? So, what did you miss? Everything? That's too bad because it was brilliant. I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. I didn't touch this thing. I didn't touch this thing. It turned itself off. Or maybe it just doesn't like my shirt and it was turned off by that. So, you can hear me now. Is that correct? That is so annoying. Let's see. All right, pump up the volume. I got crickets here. Confirmed my audio is active. No sound. I dug my ears out. Still nothing. There it is, sound. Well, so what do we do here? I guess we go back to the beginning. Kind of an updated thing. Okay. North, south, east, or west. Gregg, Jarrett's going to be here. It's a fantastic day. If you had problems and so on and so forth, we got a lot of things to do today. It's been a very, very busy news day, and we'll get back to it in just a couple of seconds anyway. So I'm not an aviation expert. But what I can tell you is that I think this started first at Denver, because that's where all the flights, most flights, were shut down first. Yeah, that was awful. Yeah. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to get somebody to come back and redub the beginning of that. It's outrageous. I check that button every day. But for some reason, it just turned itself off. How annoying. By the way, did I mention that Gregg Jarrett is going to be with us here in a little bit? Gregg Jarrett is a guy who has worked at Fox News for a couple of decades. He is amazing. He's a guy I have long admired, basically because of his amazing analysis of reality. It's unflagging, it's brilliant, and what it does is it tells us from a very educated and very experienced guy, a lot of things that people just miss. Gregg Jarrett doesn't miss anything. He's going to be joining us coming up in just a couple of moments. We just did a test over there, and for some reason, he was able to hear me, and and that wouldn't have happened had the microphone been off. That's very odd. So once again, what we did is we tested all of this. So I'm without responsibility on this because I've been doing my job. Let me tell you that. That's absolutely true. I took my wife to Love Field today for a 1:45 p.m. flight. Did she get off okay? Was she able to take off? Is that all right? Kelly Lyons, you didn't miss a thing. You did not miss anything. It was the typical, fantastic, perfect opening to the Wells Report for yet another day. Okay, it's supposed to leave at 2:30. Okay, I'll cross my fingers and hope for the very, very best, Poker. Poker Monkey on the chat room. You can join us there. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Or you can call me on the telephone at 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. I interact with the chat room all the time. Does he know how to turn on the volume button? Yes, he knows how to turn on the volume button. All right. Yeah. Let's see. Jessie is finally back from NOCA. Actually, that's not true. She's back from New Orleans, Louisiana. NOLA. It's good to have you back. We do appreciate you. All right, back to work. So the FAA having problems, and Pete Buttigieg is getting his butt kicked. He's getting his butt kicked over this, mainly by people who are trying to figure out just exactly what's going on with the Transportation Department, of which he is the secretary. That particular circumstance looks like this. People are now referring to Pete Buttigieg as the transportation secretary as not serious. He is unserious for his job. And I find that to be disturbing. That is not good news for Pete Buttigieg. He's appeared on camera a couple of different times. Strangely enough, he was going to take a flight, but he doesn't have to worry about all of this because he has a private jet that is paid for by the taxpayers. And so what's going on is he was headed out to get on his jet and fly somewhere. Strangely enough, I guess that's kind of ironic. But the circumstance was he was very professional on camera. He was forthcoming. He was willing to chat about it with the time constraints he had. But he's going to have to start being a professional right now if he wants to keep that job. He's just going to have to, because Republicans are now in the Oversight Committee, and the Oversight Committee takes a look at the Department of Transportation, and they will indeed be looking at this and the holidays and a lot of other things that have gone wrong with regards to the Department of Transportation. By the way, all these problems, people are talking a little bit about the fact that the FAA has a couple of facts. One works against it, one works for it. First of all, the FAA has a 23 plus billion-dollar budget. A $23 billion budget. And people are questioning, okay, where's the money going? The total FAA budget for the current fiscal year is 23.5 billion, a figure that reflects expanding infrastructure spending thanks to the infrastructure bill that President Biden signed into law last year. The FAA's total budget was $17.5 billion in 2019. The number soared to 28 billion in 2021 because of emergency COVID funding and fell slightly in 2022 when pandemic-related funding expired, some of which was replaced by new infrastructure funding. Funding for FAA operations has seen healthy increases over the last few years. That budget was 11 billion in 2021, 11.4 billion in 2022, and that's the operations budget, $11.9 billion in the current year. And people are looking at that money and saying, hey, wait just a darn minute. What exactly is going on? That is the constraint that works to the benefit of the FAA. The constraint that works to the detriment of the FAA is they don't have a permanent administrator right now. The nominee to head the organization, Philip Washington, has not received a confirmation hearing yet, even though Democrats were in charge of the confirmation process. Washington has faced questions about his limited aviation experience. In September, was named in a search warrant issued as a part of a political corruption investigation in Los Angeles. Because his nomination wasn't acted on during the last Congress, Biden faces a choice of this month whether to resubmit his name or consider a new nominee. President Biden renominated Washington last week, signaling the administration's continued support for him, but it remains unclear when he is going to receive a hearing. We are moments away from Gregg Jarrett of Fox News joining us on this broadcast. He's going to discuss the president's confidential, classified, what have you documents found in a closet in an old office and what the actual implications are. First legal, then political, and then what is the future? What is the future of all this? And yes, some of this involves a president you quite possibly voted for. This is the Wells Report. Stick around just a couple of moments. Sorry about the the noise glitch. I'll be back in a flash. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We're keeping our eye on the FAA story. If there are any other things, they're expecting problems to sort of go through the entire day. Once again, make sure you check with your airline if you're planning on going anywhere. Make sure you get their application, their app for your phone, and make sure you check with them before you leave today. That would be a very, very good piece of advice. Let's talk a little bit about something else when it comes to regulatory agencies operated by the federal government. There was this very strange thing from the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. They were considering a ban on gas stoves because, my God, people can be killed because of gas stoves. I mean, people have been cooking food on flames for what, 400,000 years at this point, something like that? And suddenly natural gas, one of the cleanest sources of energy in the history of the human endeavor, is somehow bad for you. Seriously? Apparently, they were serious. Commissioner Richard Trumka Jr. is a Biden employee and appointee as well, told Bloomberg that any option is on the table with their work to create regulations that would make the products safer. Products that can't be made safe can be banned. Perhaps he should have checked with President Biden. The White House came out with something that was pretty unequivocal. The White House does not support a ban on gas stoves, this according to an official today, as concerns around indoor air pollutants for appliances have made headlines. You must be joking. These are the same people that came up with this wonderful plan for us to never have wood-burning fireplaces. I have a fireplace in this house. Guess what it's powered by? That's right, natural gas. It took me forever to arrange the gas logs just right in my fireplace. It took forever to do it because I had to get the flames to sort of wander around in the logs just right, and I worked on it and ruined a pair of oven mitts and put a big burn in the carpet in front of my fireplace. Normally, you would have something like my son Mitchell has in Charlotte, North Carolina. He has a fireplace that you put wood into. Yeah, you put wood in the fireplace. But apparently, there were just too many pollutants with wood. By the way, before I left the West Coast, these people were also trying to figure out a way to kill barbecues. Now they're working on stoves. This is clearly work from a group of people that have, well, a couple of different things in mind. One, when it's cold outside, they want you to freeze. When it's warm outside, they want you to bake. They don't want you to be able to cook your food reasonably well. I have worked on electric ranges before, hated them. We have a policy here in the Wells house. If it involves heat, something like that, flame. If it involves light, electricity. By the way, if it involves driving, again, we revert back to flame, although the fuel is different. And what are they going to do once they get rid of natural gas? I'll tell you what they're going to do. They're going to start working on propane. There are people that warm themselves every year with propane. It's much more complex than natural gas. It's also the basis for LNG. These people are interested in controlling energy. It's one of the bulwarks of socialist policy. If people are freezing to death, it's very unlikely that they're going to foment a revolution against you, especially if they're hungry and especially if they can't travel. I'm just saying. I am just saying. You can draw any conclusion you want to from that. He is brilliant. He is a lawyer. He is a law professor. He's a correspondent on Fox News. He's a columnist. He's an author, a Renaissance man. His name is Gregg Jarrett. He's going to be joining us next. We have everything worked out here technically, which I have to pat myself on the back for, because as a broadcasting engineer, I am a really, really good DJ. That's all I can tell you. But I have had to learn, because I've discovered that if you can't get the machines to work, you don't get a paycheck. And so I'm getting better at it. We'll show you that handiwork coming up in just a couple of seconds as we continue on this, the 11th day of January, year of our Lord 2023. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back with Gregg Jarrett in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us today. We are very, very pleased to have somebody that I've been watching for a very long time because he's great at what he does. He has an unflagging, well-versed, experienced way of analyzing reality. He's also an author. He's a lawyer. He's a law professor. And he's a correspondent on Fox News. In fact, he's their legal analyst and commentator. Not just a pretty face. Please make welcome Mr. Gregg Jarrett. Gregg, great to have you here.
Wow, John, great introduction for me. I don't deserve it. Nobody has ever accused me of having a pretty face.
Oh, come on, man. Come on, all you TV guys. Okay. Yeah, radio guys like me, stuff like that. But you have a TV face and TV hair, and I'm very envious.
I better take off my glasses.
There's Gregg Jarrett. There he is. Let me, before we get started here, I've got to tell you, I have been the happy recipient of the verses inside the books that you've read. Your latest is Trial of the Century. It's a comprehensive look back at the Scopes trial, how it laid the framework for civil liberties today. It's off the Simon & Schuster imprint and available at Amazon. Tell me a little bit about it.
There have been so many trials that have been heralded over the years. The last century is trials of the century, everything from the Leopold and Loeb thrill killers case, the Lindbergh baby kidnapping case, the Nuremberg trials, and then a trial I covered in the courtroom for 9 months, the O.J. Simpson case. I don't think any of those compare to the Scopes trial of 1925. All of those other trials generally had, something to do with crimes against persons. And, there are thousands of those every year. But
Sadly.
This particular case really did set the stage, an important stage for academic freedom and free speech in America. And if the case had gone otherwise, the trial had gone in a different direction, I think we wouldn't have as much intellectual liberty and free speech today as we enjoy, censorship notwithstanding. But when you think about it, that was the real first major government censorship case. States were beginning to pass laws that said, you can't teach evolution in the classroom, which is so fundamental to science, because it raises doubt about the story of the divine creation in the Bible. Well, that's a clear violation of the First Amendment Establishment Clause. Clarence Darrow, the greatest trial lawyer who ever lived, was outraged at what these states were doing, led by the fundamentalist leader, William Jennings Bryan. And he decided for free he would defend this young school teacher, John Scopes, who was arrested and charged criminally for teaching evolution. And I won't give away the result, but I think it's a fascinating case. I gained access to the original trial transcripts.
Wow.
And so, people can pre-order the book online at Amazon.com or SimonandSchuster.com.
While you're at it, don't forget the Russia hoax, the illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton and frame Donald Trump, also Witch Hunt. He has a lot of these books. All of them are required reading, courtesy of my opinion on the Wells Report. So, after excoriating former President Donald Trump every possible way, what ends up happening is that suddenly President Biden is found with classified documents in a closet in an old office in Pennsylvania. When you heard that news, Gregg, what was the first thing you thought of?
Well, I laughed, but frankly, I wasn't surprised. As I wrote in a column yesterday, this happens frequently. Over the last 60 years, just about every president has had presidential papers, official records, including classified documents, end up in the wrong place. The reason, and I wrote about this last August when the raid of Mar-a-Lago took place, I said, you folks don't understand. The hasty transitions are a recipe for wayward documents. And it happens every administration because you're talking about millions of documents that have to be sorted. And in fact, Joe Biden and Donald Trump and George Bush and Barack Obama, they don't pack up their own boxes. And in fact, by law, it's done by a federal agency. They do it for them. It's the GSA. And they come in there and and the problem is that presidents tend to commingle their personal papers with official records, right? And so you have a short time frame to collate all that stuff and get it into the right hands in the right place. And then you've got huge moving vans that pull up to the White House and they use cargo planes to send the documents to the appropriate location. Now, you tell me what's going to happen. And so it was no surprise that allegedly classified documents ended up at Mar-a-Lago any more than it was that, George Bush and Barack Obama had the same thing happen to them. And so when it happened to Joe Biden, it didn't surprise me at all. The question is, did he know about it?
Yeah, exactly. Now, to get back to the history of this, Bill Clinton had a famous foray with the DOJ on this. And from what I understand, the conclusion by the National Archives made anything against Donald Trump go away immediately. Can you share a
Yeah.
little bit of that?
And again, I wrote about this at the outset of the Mar-a-Lago raid, in which I said you also don't understand that there is a legal standard here established by the Department of Justice, endorsed by the National Archives, and equally endorsed by a U.S. federal district court judge. And the principle is that any former president can keep whatever he wants, and the government has no power or authority to compel them to cough it up. Now, that was the result of the Bill Clinton case that was litigated in federal court. And, the DOJ back then said he can keep these things, even, tape recordings with allegedly classified information that were found in his sock drawer at home. Okay. So, Merrick Garland decided that when he found out that Trump had documents at Mar-a-Lago, he said, the Clinton standard, that longstanding decade-old principle, forget about it. Make
Right.
it vanish, make it go away. Because the guy's name is Donald Trump, and we're going to go after him with a vengeance. Forget about our own DOJ interpretation of the law. Forget what the judge said in Washington, D.C. And, Merrick Garland has accused Trump of obstructing justice because he wasn't as compliant as the FBI wanted when they demanded all of these documents in Mar-a-Lago. Well, Trump was simply following the Clinton standard. You're
Right.
allowed to object. You're allowed to resist. You're allowed to litigate it in civil court. And that was the proper remedy and cure for Merrick Garland. Simply go to a civil court judge and file a motion to compel production of documents pursuant to the original subpoena. That's what you do. And why do you do that? Because the governing statute on presidential papers is the Presidential Records Act of 1978. That is a civil statute. It's not a criminal statute. It is controlling. It supersedes any of the ridiculous threatened crimes identified by Garland in his search warrant.
Well, so what I want to talk about here, obviously, it goes right back to Merrick Garland and the decisions he's making with this new DOJ, which is predicated on, well, I haven't figured it out yet. We're speaking with Gregg Jarrett from Fox News. Gregg Jarrett joining us to talk a little bit about this. Merrick Garland is in a bad spot right now.
Yeah, he totally is, because the revelation that Joe Biden did the same thing that Donald Trump did, blows a cannon hole through any potential criminal case that Merrick Garland was contemplating against Donald Trump, um, for a couple of reasons. First of all, from a legal standpoint, it will inexorably backfire politically. It will be toxic and poisoning.
Yeah.
Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, Trump could assert the affirmative defense, what's known as selective prosecution. Wait a minute. You're letting everybody else do this, former presidents, but you're targeting me specifically. That's a legitimate and viable and potentially successful defense. The other more broader part of it is, as you and I have been talking about, you have to show for these alleged crimes intent, deliberate, and willful conduct. But if, first of all, Donald Trump hadn't gone through those boxes himself, and I know somewhat the former president, he doesn't do that sort of thing. He
Nah.
leaves it to others.
He has
He's,
people to do that.
like Reagan, he delegates, right? So you'd have to show that he knew this stuff. And even if he was put on notice by the FBI, you've got these things. His defense is, but I'm entitled to. Read the language of the Presidential Records Act. It allows discretion and latitude to a former president to maintain custody and control of presidential papers, including arguably classified documents, which he may have declassified. That has not been litigated.
Gregg Jarrett, our guest from Fox News. And so when you come right down to this, I have to ask a philosophical question. Donald Trump is a disruptor. He not only
Correct.
disrupts the left, he disrupted the Democrat Party, and he disrupted the Republican Party. Mitch McConnell, the best example of that. And neither of those parties could find any reason to not predicate this outlandish behavior, and I'm characterizing it that. If you disagree, by all means say so. This outlandish behavior against first a sitting president and then a former president.
Yeah, that's what happens when you're a disruptor, when you vow to drain the swamp, when you're a new guy in town, which Trump certainly was. And, he doesn't follow the established rules. And, he makes good on his promises to, turn Washington, D.C. upside down, to fix what was broken. And frankly, everything is broken in Washington, D.C., and has been for decades. So, naturally you're going to be a target. But I wrote 2 books about the biggest dirty trick ever perpetrated in American politics. And that was to accuse Trump of colluding with Russia.
That was horrendous.
Which we now know he didn't do. And it was Hillary Clinton who invented the lie, funded the lie, and it was her cronies who actually fed the lie to Christopher Steele. And the FBI knew this. They knocked it down from the outset. But they hid it from the American public. They concealed it from Congress. And they used it as a pretext to go after Trump, to try to drive him from office. They continued their investigation. And, this was the greatest mass delusion in American political history. There was no collusion conspiracy between Trump and the Russians. There was a conspiracy between the Hillary Clinton campaign, the Democratic National Committee, and the FBI to falsely accuse Trump, to implicate him for things he didn't do.
Do you see anything that might be somewhat intriguing regarding the fact that the papers, as announced so far, deal with Ukraine, Iran, and Britain?
Well, it doesn't surprise me that Ukraine is in there. His son was making millions of dollars from Ukraine, 31 million from the Chinese Communist Party, which was the biggest contributor to the
University of Pennsylvania
Biden office, where he's hiding or left behind all of these classified documents. You can be sure the CCP has their hands on those classified documents.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. The Russians gave, $40 million to Hunter Biden. And Joe Biden, it's pretty clear if you take a look at any of the laptop evidence, which I've done, it directly implicates the president, Joe Biden, as being a participant and a beneficiary of the tens of millions of dollars, more than $100 million that flowed into the Biden family coffers, along with James Biden, the president's brother.
Indeed.
So, it's
Indeed.
amazing.
Gregg Jarrett, like I said, you took this interview yesterday, and I can't thank you enough for doing so. Thank you very much for lending your august wisdom and knowledge and all of the things that I've been talking about to this broadcast. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, John. Always, anytime.
Yeah, man. I'm going to take you up on that for sure.
Okay.
Take
we'll
good
do
care.
it again soon.
Have a great
All right.
day and enjoy your life this afternoon and forever. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, man.
Okay,
Take
bye-bye.
care.
Gregg Jarrett joining us on the Wells Report. Great guy. Like I said, he took this at last second. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us today. Once again, thanks to Gregg Jarrett, Fox News legal analyst and commentator and author as well. The brand new book, it's still not out. The ink is still drying on some of the pages. It hasn't gotten to a bookstore near you, so you can pre-order the latest book. It's called Trial of the Century, a comprehensive look back at the Scopes trial, which, by the way, was a landmark when it comes to First Amendment rights in this nation. It laid the framework for our civil liberties today. It's on Simon & Schuster. It's available now for pre-order at Amazon. And Gregg Jarrett, a very kind man who took this interview at the last second, as I said. Once again, we've been talking a little bit about a lot of the things that Mr. Jarrett pointed out today. We've been talking about the fact that already the story has kind of morphed away from what the actual top secret information was, which I suspected, because it's years old. It's been sitting in a closet. Anybody who wanted to see it likely got to see it. So you can pretty much write that off. As Mike Redden-Wee brilliantly said yesterday, this is a nothing burger unless the assertions of Jesse Waters on Fox News last night are true. Why were papers from Britain, Ukraine, and Iran involved in the collection already announced? Why was that? The simple case of the matter is that Britain is where the Steele dossier came from, and that implicates the Democrat Party, Hillary Clinton, the FBI, and of course, the vice president. Ukraine, as Gregg Jarrett said, that's obvious. That's obvious. Iran, the nuclear deal. And since John Kerry was the guy that negotiated it, God knows what's inside that mess. But I can tell you this. Of all the things that got my attention in this, it was the president yesterday who was asked by the assembled press corps in Mexico City as he stood with Justin Trudeau and President Obrador and himself. Someone asked him about these documents. Clearly reading from a paper, he explained something about how it was a complete surprise to him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Many of the things that we suggested that he say yesterday on this broadcast. But then he said something that raised my eyebrows, and they've been raised so long at this point, they're all cramping. He said, my lawyers told me not to ask what was on the paperwork, what was on those documents. That incongruous statement, the fact that it was prepared, the fact that he was reading it, says an awful lot about those papers. Like I said, obsolete top secret papers, anybody who wanted to see them could see them, unless they implicate the president in wrongdoing. If that's the case, then what we see there is not just souvenir taking. That's a cover-up. And if so many people could say that President Trump was trying to cover up this and that and such and so, obstructing justice, blah, 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 does the same standard apply to Joe Biden? There are all kinds of problems with the story. Why were lawyers cleaning out his office closet? Did they have security clearances? Take two. Did they have security clearances required to be able to read top secret SCI material? Nope. Just exactly why is it that another Biden is engaged in an organization that is closely engaged with the Chinese Communist Party? Why did $54 million suddenly appear when the Biden Center opened up on campus? He was paid $950,000 a year by the university. Well, did that money come from a Chinese endowment? Now, I want to make something abundantly clear here. I was reviled by the assertions that were cast against Donald Trump for many of these same things. Any use of the obvious holes in this story that you just heard me talk about are essentially punitive. I have no interest in them being used as a predicate for some sort of conspiracy theory. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, especially these days, because most of the conspiracy theories we've been hearing about became the news. But what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at this hypocrisy, and we spent a lot of time talking about it yesterday. I wish I could have spent more time with Gregg Jarrett because he is an eminent media authority. Maybe in our next conversation, we'll have a conversation about the media and how it has twisted itself into a pretzel, trying to explain just exactly why the Mar-a-Lago documents were a lot worse than the Philadelphia Biden Center closet documents. It's just not beneficial to anyone, including President Biden, including the governmental process of the United States, including any of this. It doesn't help the media, it doesn't help you, doesn't help me, doesn't help Democrats, doesn't help anybody. All it does is keep driving the approval rating of the American government into the weeds and scaring Americans to death. They already think the number one threat to freedom and liberty in the United States is the government. Just how far are we going to go with this? This is the Wells Report. Thanks for joining us. Hour number 2 is coming up next. Gosh, thanks for being here. Did you like that? See you in a minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Welcome. Glad you're here. What do? We report the news honestly and fairly. What else do we do? Well, we analyze the news for fact and bias. Yes, I make commentary. That is not the news. A lot of people doing this job think their opinion is news. My opinion is my opinion. It's just as valuable as yours. So by all means, please do share it. You can do that a couple of different ways. You can go to the chat room on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. It's been very, very busy today, and I sincerely appreciate it. From people saying, hello, Mr. Jarrett, and so on to some very nice comments about the interview. Thank you very much for all those kind words. By the way, the executive producer of the Wells Report is Dirk Steele. He runs Steel Boy Productions in Denver, Colorado. And he spent time with me last night to be able to make Zoom work for today's interview with Gregg Jarrett, which, by the way, if you missed, make sure you go back and take a look at the first hour. Now, while I was self-congratulatory in my ability to, with Dirk's help, be able to master, or at least operate, brand new technology that got me very fancy double live box on the old video. I was very pleased with myself. At the beginning of the show, I forgot to operate the microphone button. And so the technical term for that is technical dumbassery. And I sincerely apologize. If you're watching this on YouTube or on Patreon or on Rumble, I'm going to I attempted to edit all of that garbage out. And so you may not have actually seen what ensued, but you didn't miss a thing. All right? So, I mean, it was brilliant. Normally, when I have technical difficulties and nobody can actually hear what I'm saying, the show is uniformly great. And then I realized nobody could hear a word I said. So nothing in the universe is without balance. You've heard me say that. Well, I learn a brand new skill and I have a wonderful thing and blah, 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 blah. And then I screw up something simple. So that's what happened there. Once again, sincere thanks to Mr. Gregg Jarrett. I appreciate it. By the way, speaking of the chat room, Mike says, so I have a question. The vote on defunding the IRS, that has to be a bill passed and signed. Is that correct? The answer is yes, it is correct. And so you're saying, well, why are they passing it? Because it's certainly not going to survive Mitch McConnell's Senate Republicans, who will say, nah, this is ridiculous. Yeah, that's stupid. Meanwhile, Chuck Schumer is going, gosh, these guys are such idiots, and it'll immediately die. And the only reason I bring that up, because I'm pointing out that the House of Representatives, the only part of American government in Republican control at this particular moment, they are very likely not going to see many of the things that they try to get done that are outside the House done. They're not going to be able to see those things, and welcome to gridlock in Washington. But as you know, Washington is currently $32 trillion in debt. $32 trillion in debt. So much money, no one can even conceive of it. But the simple case of the matter is that gridlock in Washington, D.C. is good. Although the people of the United States, at least the people that I keep listening to, do want serious problems plaguing our nation fixed. The border, the outright abuse of power from our executive branch law enforcement and intelligence agencies, the Department of Homeland Security. Just exactly what are they securing? Well, they're securing Democrat policies, what they're doing. And they're in a very fascist phase where anybody that argues with them gets censored courtesy of their tight relationship with big tech. So there are a lot of big problems. Not everybody agrees what those problems are, but those problems need solutions as opposed to political exploitation. And that's what we have. So, yeah, the Republicans are moving forward. Would I have moved forward with a bill trying to abolish the IRS, which, by the way, they're going to vote on later tonight? Probably not. I'm beginning to think that that was a tactical error because it's too big. What you need to do is you just need to reform the income tax process. That's all you got to do. You don't have to abolish the IRS. As I said in Twitter earlier today, the simple case of the matter is that if indeed you do a flat tax situation where you and I and everybody else can sit down at a kitchen table and do our taxes in 20 minutes, send a check for $5-6 or expect a $5 or $6 return, then the IRS will abolish itself. Like 60% of the people that are working for the IRS currently won't have anything to do. Sooner or later, they'll be out of business or they'll transfer to other agencies. And that's good. It reduces the size of government by reducing government. By the way, the flat tax plan, it's long been proven that the government would have more money. And all you got to do is fix the income tax problem. So they should have passed a bill that did that. While we're on the subject, there was a real good dust-up between Joy Reid and Byron Donalds over the future of Social Security. Joy Reid on MSNBC was working very, very hard to try to nail down Representative Donalds on agreeing that Social Security should be privatized. In point of fact, I disagree. I disagree with privatizing the IRS and so on. I'm sorry, Social Security. I think it's a bad idea. Besides, there's a better solution. Social Security should be based on Treasury bills, as opposed to whatever vaporous promise from the government that can be changed at a whim. Treasury bills are the good faith and credit of the United States of America. So when you contribute to Social Security, if it's based on Treasury bills, Treasury bonds, then what ends up happening is they have to make good on those bonds. And therefore, stupid things like trying to get rid of gas stoves or forcing electric cars on people, those would be detrimental to the economy and therefore detrimental to being able to keep the economy moving to the point where those Treasury bills would be good when they come due. The government still gets all the money. They get all the money, but they are forced by the good faith and credit clause of the United States Code. They are forced to not screw up the economy, which is something that President Biden did. Throws $1.9 trillion into the economy and then curtails energy production in the United States. Inflation goes up through the roof, some people say. And what ends up happening is that because we're paying more money to buy goods and services in the United States, the government collects more taxes. No. We didn't raise the middle class tax rates. No, we didn't raise taxes on the middle class. No, we raised taxes because the middle class is paying more for everything. What, a dozen eggs, $10? What are you talking about here? What are you, nuts? And so there we find ourselves in a situation where the economy can be manipulated for the sake of politics, which is exactly what Joe Biden did. It all comes to an end. If when they screw up the economy, it screws up the good faith and credit of the United States of America. And so, are there problems? Yeah, big ones. Social Security is going to fall on its face in 20 years or so. Nobody is going to be able to stop it. It has to be reformed. The simplest way to do it is to simply base it on Treasury bonds. Yes, I'll be writing that up. You'll be able to see it so it doesn't move at the speed of my voice, et cetera, et cetera. And thank you. Getting back to the chat room, Texas Rat Slayer, 6mm, yow. Sure used enough bullet there, Tex. Anyway, says, howdy, y'all. Good to have you here, Tex Rats. Thanks very much for being with us. Let's see. Glad you're getting guests for the show. Definitely stepping up. Doing our best. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. And says, great interview. Always enjoy Gregg's insight. Me too. I read all of his books. They're required reading. They certainly are. See what else is going on. Yeah, get more guest speakers. That was cool. Well, I'll do my absolute dead level best now, courtesy of the executive producer of this broadcast, Dirk Steele. I will hopefully be doing more than that, more of those. Helped a friend test WebEx for her work from home. Zoom seems much easier to use. It was actually pretty easy. Now, if I can just remember to turn my mic on, cross your fingers. Gary Abshire says, let's do a consumption tax. Yeah, the problem with the consumption tax is if it moves, it gets taxed. And if you think they abuse the tax system now, wait until it's a consumption tax. That's a mistake. They have it in France. It's vaporous. I want something plain. I want something simple. It's an income tax, right? Most of us agree income tax is okay. The problem with it is that all that money, regardless of how much money government has, they spend more. Once again, if we tie their obligations to us to treasury bonds, they can't do that. And a flat tax forces them to live within their means. Not only would you be able to figure out what your taxes are, you'd also be able to figure out exactly how much money the government has. And while we're on the subject of wish list things from John David Wells, I'd also like to have a cap on government spending that is a percentage of the gross domestic product of any given year. Once again, if you tie the money going to Washington to the gross domestic product of these United States, there's going to be a little bit of reticence to, say, for example, push everybody into an electric car before there are charging stations on the road. Little things like that. The solutions are right there. If I can figure them out, they can figure them out. Why haven't they done any of those? I don't know. However, the Republican Party is trying. They are trying to provide oversight, trying to provide accountability, and they're also doing something else. The Republican Party is going to try to vote. Actually, they will vote and probably pass term limits for Congress people. Many people on this broadcast who watch this broadcast have said term limits are essential. Well, you just might get your chance. We're going to be talking about that coming up a little bit later on. We'll also be talking about what the House Oversight Chairman wants to do. He's got some things he wants to get across. I'll bring you up to date on those. But we'll talk first about term limits as we continue here on the Wells Report. We've got a quick break here and then a quick segment. We'll talk about term limits there, and I'll talk about the Oversight Chairman next. All right? Gary says 2 key components of the old Communist Manifesto is devalue currency and choke supply. Yep. Yes, indeed. And they're trying it. Actually, the Consumer Product Safety Commission tried to ban gas stoves yesterday. Seriously? You must be joking. The thing about it is, no, they're not. What they're doing is they're working on what Gary's talking about. Trying to prepare the political playground of socialism. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. You'll never guess what just came across the wires. This from Fox News. President Biden aides have found at least one more batch of classified documents located at a location other than the Pence Biden Center in Washington, D.C., that he used in the years after he was vice president during the Obama administration, according to Fox News. A source has... I'm sorry. I am just so sorry, but a source told NBC News, which first reported the development, that aides to President Biden have been searching for additional documents that contain classified material in other locations that may have been used by the president. The mental picture is the president walking around right after he finished his job as vice president with a briefcase that is partially open with papers falling out of it everywhere he goes. This development comes after a separate batch of classified documents were found from Biden's private office located at the Penn Biden Center on Tuesday. This is breaking news. It just hit the wires. And Corinne Jean-Pierre has been doing her absolute dead level best to try to explain it. I've got a video of Corinne Jean-Pierre that I'm going to play here after the break because we're running out of time. But just like I said yesterday, I want to make a couple of things clear. First of all, as we found out today, courtesy of Gregg Jarrett in the first hour, don't miss that interview, all presidents have classified information. All presidents, okay, quote unquote, mishandle that classified information. I found out today something I did not know. I found out today that Gregg Jarrett, as he reported, that classified documents were found inside President Clinton's sock drawer. Like I said, presidents have classified material. They keep it for souvenirs. Maybe, and I'm not speculating here, I'm just pointing this out, maybe they're trying to keep something, if not hidden, certainly something they can refer to if somebody brings up something that happened during their administration. So they don't have to go through the archives to find out the paperwork to try to defend themselves. That is maybe one of the reasons why President Trump had some of those things and why now President Biden has some of those things. And so, all of that being said, to send the DOJ after presidents for paperwork that are best handled in a civil law situation is nothing more than an attempt to try to force President Trump to not run for the presidency in 2024. And what they've done is they've dug this gigantic moat, filled it with alligators like U.S. attorneys and special prosecutors and all these people trying to run down President Trump one way, first one way, then another, then another. And what's happened is they've fallen into that moat themselves. There's a famous quote from President Obama regarding Joe Biden. And it's rather crude, shall we say. Never underestimate the ability of Joe Biden to things up. Well, we can now look at Hunter Biden's laptop and say, boy, just forgetting where classified stuff is seems to run in the family. But you got to hand it to Hunter Biden. He left an entire laptop full of it. There's more. We're going to be reporting it because we have to, and because you need to know what's going on in these United States without the filter of the mainstream media trying to twist themselves into a pretzel to say everything is everybody else's fault besides the president. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. I'm John David Wells. Another tranche of classified documents in another location aside from the University of Pennsylvania Biden Center has been found by aides of President Biden. This is breaking news. It just happened. Earlier today, there was a conversation in the White House press office with Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. I haven't had a chance to edit this, so I'm going to play you about 5 minutes or so of this because I think you need to see it. This is the very latest. Off we go. Karine Jean-Pierre from the White House press office earlier today.
Thank you, Karine. First, does President Biden have confidence in Transportation Secretary Buttigieg?
Yes.
Why?
Because Secretary Buttigieg he respects the secretary and the work that he has been doing. You have seen the secretary on TV. You have probably spoken to him yourself, and they are doing everything that they can to make sure that the experience that Americans have is a good one. That's why they've held the airlines accountable. You've seen the secretary do that over and over again, and we understand. We understand what Americans have been going through these past couple of months. That's why the secretary has been very clear on making sure that they are held accountable. Has put in processes in place to make sure that occurs. And yes, the president has confidence in Secretary Buttigieg.
And then on these documents, how could anyone be that irresponsible? Isn't that what this president says about mishandling classified documents?
The president spoke to this personally. He spoke to this personally. He believes that classified documents and information should be taken seriously. He takes them seriously, and he was surprised to learn by any records had been. I disagree. Here's what happened. Once
Then why is there a Justice Department?
Well, let me explain to you the process. Here's what happened when his lawyers found out that the documents were there. They immediately turned them over to the archives.
But they were
But
there
they
in the first
immediately
place.
turned them over to the
you say
archives.
They did the right thing.
I'm not
when they
gonna
figured it out.
go into specifics, but what I'm reiterating to you is what you heard from the president yourself, Peter, which is how he saw the process and how he respects and truly respects and takes this very seriously. And when he knew and how surprised he was by it, and the actions that the right actions that the lawyers took. Again, this is under investigation, is under review by the Department of Justice, and we're going to let that process continue.
How can President Biden be trusted moving forward with America's secrets?
Because his lawyers, his team did the right thing.
But he had a closet with
His
classified
lawyers
information in
did
it
the
that
right.
they found. How did it get there?
Again.
Did the
He
lawyers
did.
do
He
the
was
right thing?
surprised that the records were there. He spoke to this
But they were
personally.
there.
He was surprised that the records were there, and when his lawyers found out and his team found out that they were there, they turned it over to the archives, and now it's being reviewed by the Department of Justice.
And just one more. Why didn't President Biden want to see what's really going on at the border?
He did see exactly what's going on at the border.
He didn't talk to any migrants, and he didn't go anywhere that people actually cross illegally. Why not?
But he went to the migrant center, which was a critical place to be when you think about the partners who are our partners who are helping support the migrants on the ground there. There happened to be no migrants at the facility at the time that he visited. But let's
because El Paso has been crushed. The shelters are full. There are overflow migrants sleeping in the streets, and then it's just a coincidence that suddenly the president shows up and.
Well, let me talk about what's going on in El Paso, right? El Paso did go down significantly prior to the president's visit by about 70%. And that's a good thing, Peter. That's a good thing that we've seen the numbers go down. And that is something that we should be saying, okay, that's a good job there. It has helped ease pressure all across the community, but the president's visit had nothing to do with it. And so, look, again, he went to a migrant center. He went to one of the busiest port of entry, which is in El Paso. And so the president got to see. He went to the border. He got to see for himself, we've always been very clear that he was going to talk to the people on the ground who's working on the border. And that's what you saw. You saw him meet with the CBP. You saw him meet with partners on the ground, as I just stated, who deal with migrants and their families. And the president also is going to continue to call on Congress to take action. Look, the president has been doing the work. And if you think about the record funding, he has done more than any prior president to secure the border and build a safe, orderly, and humane immigration system. And that's what the president has been able to do. We've got 23,000 agents working to secure the border, and we'll soon be hiring 300 more. That's what the president has done here. And so, again, he went down there, he saw for himself, and I'll just leave it there.
Okay. That's all I could do not to laugh. This obviously was before we found out that there are even more classified documents. Tomorrow's press conference is probably going to be really, really exciting. She is terrible. She absolutely is. On the chat room, she is a terrible spin doctor. Yeah, she's awful. She's awful. And and so what we have here is we have a mess, Biden style, that is enveloping his presidency. And I gotta say, there's so many laughter faces, laughter emojis on the chat room. Let me give you a few of these things. Let's see. Gary says that Biden won't be witch hunted like President Trump was. That's correct. Anhoy Guzman decides to say that that's why the lawyers didn't want Biden to know the content of the papers. He would spill it. Actually, my wife, a Democrat, not a leftist, not a progressive, a real Democrat, said the following: plausible deniability. They don't want the president to know what the papers said because they want him to be able to deny that he knew anything about them. They're his papers. They were in his possession. And while a very good case can be made, the president doesn't remember anything about them, not necessarily based on obfuscation. Another big word for you there, Gary. But actually based on, God, I hate to say this, mental incompetence. There you have it. He doesn't know, and his lawyers don't want him to know. Moreover, his lawyers don't want him to realize that he was briefed on what those papers were. That's why they didn't tell him. Oh, terrible. Oh, awful. The tap dancing ought to be good. Yeah. In the words of noted Democrats during the speaker fight, time to get out the popcorn. Let's see what else. No facts here, please, says Mike. I almost laughed because in the middle of that video that we just saw, Mike points, it comes out with LOL, exclamation point, exclamation point. Yeah. Let's see. Mike goes on to say, yeah, I see a big BS on that. Yeah. The world's greatest press secretary? Not so much. I miss Kayleigh. I do too. I do. Going to a sanitized El Paso for a couple of hours is not going to the border. Correct. Then Kyle Vermillion. Kyle, welcome to the Wells Report. I'm glad you're here. Thanks very much for being a part of our broadcast. He points out that the Gateway Pundit, I suppose I can't open that. I can't open that on this chat room. Anyway, I'll look at the Gateway Pundit. Go to gatewaypundit.com and take a look at that. Let's see. What else do we have here? Did you see her baby pictures over Christmas? Adorable. No, I missed those. She's very beautiful. She probably looked great when she was a little kid. Let's see. Biden regime impeached in 2023. Save America. Please, Lord, says Beth Hexamer. Hexamer? Beth, welcome to the broadcast. I haven't seen your name before, but it's good to see you here. Let's see. And then Gary posits, indeed, Kayleigh is awesome. Yeah, she is awesome. She's really, really good. She's currently kissing her brand new baby boy. Thanks, Mike. I I knew that too. Isn't that sweet? I can hardly wait to see baby pictures. Those are the baby pictures I want to see. I want to see the baby pictures of Kayleigh McEnany's new young son. That's what I want to do. You don't want to see Kayleigh McEnany's baby pictures? Kayleigh's pretty. She probably was a beautiful baby too. All right, so there you go. What we have now is more classified documents in the possession of the former vice president. That is, what's the facepalm emoji? I can't find it. It's unbelievable. All right, moving on. Let's get back to the news, as if we haven't been dealing with the news all morning or all day. House Republicans are renewing a push for congressional term limits after taking a majority this month in an effort to confront the, quote, corruption, unquote, of career politicians. Not all career politicians are corrupt, just the corrupt ones. And remember, when you have one party that has absolutely no problem saying in public, we want this to be a fundamentally changed America and we want socialism. Okay, that's very disturbing and very concerning and all that kind of stuff. But the corruption of career politicians that I'm concerned with are the ones that, well, don't necessarily overtly show their corruption. They just do things like pass a $1.7 trillion omnibus bill when what they could have passed was a continuing resolution and let the House of Representatives untangle America's budget as a part of this Congress this year. But because Mitch McConnell, not saying he's corrupt, Mitch McConnell didn't want that to happen. He could have stopped that bill. Why didn't he? Got to keep the government running. No, you don't. No, you don't. So anyway, Republicans are looking for term limits. This is not something I agree with. I believe that the people of the United States have term limits in their hands with every ballot. And I know what you're thinking. You're saying, John David, what if the ballots don't matter? You yourself have said, hey, we got to start voting these people out of office while we still can. I understand. I understand. I know exactly what you're saying, and I hear you. But term limits is a blunt instrument. It is a blunt instrument. We don't know what the unintended consequences would be. But I will put this out again, which I've said several times. There's only one thing more dangerous in Washington, D.C. than a politician, and that's a lame duck politician. Yeah. So with that being said, there you go. So earlier this week, GOP South Carolina Representative Ralph Norman introduced HJ Resolution 11, House Joint Resolution 11, an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that would limit the number of terms someone may serve. The proposed amendment from Norman, if ratified, remember, I believe it takes 3/4 of both houses of Congress and 2/3 of the states to be able to change the Constitution. The proposed amendment, if ratified, would limit those serving in the House of Representatives to 3 terms, a total of 6 years. Those serving in the Senate to 2 terms, a total of 12 years. For those elected during a special election to fill a vacancy, the legislation, according to Norman's office, would define the length of a qualifying term as at least 1 year in the House of Representatives and at least 3 years in the United States Senate. Okay? So that's the way this would work. It is, however, a constitutional amendment and not something that is easily passed. So a lot of this is symbolic, but at least it's in the conversation for a change. And the conversation must be heard. Like I said, my only concern is what will these lame duck politicians do? And frankly, I believe that someone in the House of Representatives, the bite of the apple may last 8 years. I'm just saying. But maybe not. Let's see. By the way, Ann points out that 18 Republican senators voted for the omnibus. Yeah. Yeah, they did. Why do you suppose that is? I'll tell you why. Because we have quality Republican senators. They're quality candidates. In other words, they see things the way of Mitch McConnell. And so what we have is the highest collection of quality losers in the Republican Senate caucus than anybody has ever seen in American government. $1.7 trillion. Out flipping outrageous. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We are giving you the news, analyzing the news for fact and bias. We are providing commentary and debate, and the debate is flying. And I'm glad it is. And I certainly hope you keep doing it. You can do it on the chat room, which is happening right now. Or you can call us 817-379-2172. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Breaking news as we speak. 210 House Democrats have voted against a bill requiring care for infants who survived their abortions. I don't know what to say. Other breaking news, the White House is pressed on the mystery swirling around President Biden's documents. The White House is punting on that. We just reported that, and thanks very much for that. Let's see what else. Speaker McCarthy confirms he's going to bar 3 top Democrats from their committees. Let me give you that. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said he's going to keep his promise to block 3 headline-grabbing Democrats from their committees in the 118th Congress. McCarthy told Punchbowl News in an interview published yesterday that he will act to prevent Representatives Adam Schiff, the Democrat from California, Eric Swalwell, the Democrat from California, from sitting on the House Intelligence Committee. He will also seek to remove Representative Ilhan Omar, the Democrat from Minnesota, from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Here's what the speaker said, quote, Swalwell cannot get a security clearance in the private sector. I'm not going to give him a government security clearance, said McCarthy. He echoed statements he made to Fox News in November. Schiff has lied too many times to the American public. He should not be on Intel. As for Omar, McCarthy has previously argued she would be stripped of her committee seat for her outspoken criticism of Israel and Jews in general, which critics say is borderline anti-Semitic. It's not borderline. Ilhan Omar is an anti-Jewish bigot. She's an anti-Jewish bigot. And she's got a seat on the Foreign Affairs Committee? Really? So the speaker is acting. Let's see what happens. I made all 3 cases before. It's not like it's anything new. Remember, this is what Nancy Pelosi, the type of Congress she wanted to have, said the speaker. In the last Congress, then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi removed Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Republican from Georgia, and Paul Gosar, the Republican from Arizona, from their committees after separate controversies involving each lawmaker. The House voted in 2021 to oust Greene from the Committee on Education and Labor and the House Budget Committee after she made several conspiratorial posts on social media and shared a picture of herself holding a gun alongside images of Representative Omar, Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Greene has since renounced some of the conspiracy theories she once espoused. Yeah, or she's just being quiet about them. Once again, conspiracy theories have this nasty habit these days of becoming fact. The conspiracy theories of one political party end up being the facts in the news. Gosar was censured by the House and stripped of his committee assignments. Let's see. Gosar was censured by the House and stripped of his committee assignments after posting a video of an animated cartoon that showed him killing Ocasio-Cortez and attacking President Biden. At each time, Republicans and Democrats were setting a dangerous precedent by kicking members off the minority off their committees. McCarthy had promised that if Republicans captured the House majority in 2022, Greene and Gosar would get their committee assignments back. He would block 3 Democrats from being seated on those committees. Fox News reached out to Speaker McCarthy for comment, as well as 3 Democrats in question did not immediately receive a response. Omar's office pointed to a statement she made in November on McCarthy's threat. It said, quote, McCarthy's effort to repeatedly single me out for scorn and hatred, including threatening to strip me from my committee, does nothing to address the issues our constituents deal with. It does nothing to address inflation, healthcare, or solve the climate crisis. That's what she said in November. It also didn't have anything to say about her anti-Jewish bigotry, which is plain. So Swalwell tweeted that McCarthy was acting purely out of vengeance. No, he's acting purely out of common sense. That is a good thing. So back to term limits. What are your comments? Put them in the chat room, and I will get to them here in the 3rd hour of the Wells Report. Meanwhile, Oversight Chair Comer is working on a top priority probe into Hunter Biden. And he said while he was doing this, make no mistake, we are also going to be investigating Joe Biden. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer has reignited the GOP's top priority investigation into Hunter Biden. Sorry, I have obviously tear gas in my eye. I had to do that. I was trying to fight through it, but no good. Anyway, the top priority investigation into Hunter Biden and big tech suppression of damaging information on the Biden family business ahead of the 2020 election. Also, he is seeking Biden family bank transaction data. Once again, this is a mistake that the president did for himself. What he did was he said, I want to know every financial transaction you make that's $600 or more. There are over 150 special inquests into the Biden family financial dealings. They have been kept suppressed, and the House is looking to try to bring those out into the public. Again, another precedent set by Democrats trying to get Donald Trump's tax returns. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. This has been the second hour of the Wells Report. Thanks very much for watching today. We've got hour number 3 next. Stay right where you are. Back with more in a moment. And there we go. So we shall return. Thanks again. I'm going to go wash my eye out. Got to go. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. There is commentary. That's not the news. That's not what we do. From a standpoint of trying to make opinion into news. If you want that, MSNBC is right around the corner. Also CNN, although they're not nearly as bad at it as they used to be. That being said, we also have debate, which is not something you see an awful lot of. When somebody like me opines, the check and balance is what you bring to the conversation. Debate's essential. So if you hear something that I say you disagree with, join us on the chat room, if you will, or call me on the telephone, 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. That's the telephone number. Oh, hi. Something the Democrats said is something that I wholeheartedly agree with. I know. I just read a story about 210 of them voting against medical care for a baby that survives an abortion, which is ghoulish. That happened last hour. I don't know what to say. I still do not know what to say. Last hour, we asked your opinion on a House idea. The House Republicans are putting another resolution out there. It's a constitutional amendment that would provide term limits for congressmen and senators. It would be 3 terms for a congressman, 2 terms for a senator. And like I said, it's not in the Constitution for a reason, because the people of the United States can remove anybody from office they choose to with any election, assuming the elections are honest. Now, I'm not going down that rabbit hole, but I'll just let the facts speak for themselves on that. Buddy McBride says term limits should be voted on by the states in regards to their senators and congresspeople. Let's get back to the 10th Amendment and states' rights. Sounds good to me. That would be one way of doing it, by the way. Let's see. Saw a funny meme, says Gary. Conspiracy theories 2022, 37-0. Yeah, there you go. Let's see. The Ben Biden Center was funded with $54.6 million from an anonymous Chinese donor. There is no such thing as an anonymous anyone when it comes to a totalitarian government. It is the Chinese Communist Party. Let's see. Wind and allergies are horrible. Got stinging watery eyes too. Don't know where that came from, but let me tell you something. Here in Texas, we have something called mountain cedar. It kills me every year, every single year. Let's see. Gary Olivier says term limits, 2 on every level. Okay. But remember, you're going to have to deal with lame duck politicians then. Just saying. A political office was originally set up as a public service, not a career. Time to get back to that. And it's going to have to be a constitutional amendment, and that is a hard thing to get through. Let's get back to the Democrats I agree with. Not many, but they've got a point this time, and I want to make sure you have a chance to opine on it should you choose to. House Democrats intend to fully participate in new select committees established by the Republican majority to investigate the Biden administration, including a new judiciary subcommittee on the alleged weaponization of the FBI and other arms of the government against American citizens. Democrat Caucus Chairman Representative Pete Aguilar of California, he's a Democrat, said this, quote, "We call that the tinfoil hat committee in our caucus." Oh, really? Commentary forthcoming. Said Democrats will not boycott any of the new GOP-led committees, as Republicans did with the January 6th committee in the last Congress. He goes on to say, quote, "It's our intent to seat members on every subcommittee, every select committee, every subcommittee that the leadership on the majority side advances. It's in our best interest to make sure we are representing the will of the caucus and the American public. interesting order there. And the Republicans don't have an opportunity behind closed doors to shape and add to conspiracy theories not in the interests of the American public. I'm sorry, I can't let that one go without just a little bit of commentary. First of all, yes, one of the huge mistakes the Democrat Party made was to shunt aside Republicans they didn't want on various subcommittees or various committees or select committees, like the January 6th committee. Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney were the only ones seated on the January 6th committee, which is why we only got half the story. I do not want the Republican Party, the Speaker, Republican leadership to withhold seats on any committee from Democrats through any use of any legerdemain. Just as I said, the January 6th committee was illegitimate because they made that decision. If indeed Speaker McCarthy and House Republican leadership do the same thing, then they will be equally guilty of withholding information from the people of the United States. Will it be messy? Sure. Will it be argumentative? Uh-huh. Will it be essential to American democracy? Absolutely. For the health of the republic, everybody's got to get a chance to speak their piece, whether you agree with it or not. It's one of the things that makes America what it is, the greatest country in the history of the human endeavor. By the way, in case you're wondering, the House of Representatives voted 221 to 211 to establish a new Judiciary Select Committee on the weaponization of the federal government, long overdue. The committee will be led by incoming House Judiciary Chairman, Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio. He was a guy that was pushed aside by Nancy Pelosi in the January 6th committee. It would have been a different committee had she not done that. By the way, it will consist of 13 members. The panel is expected to investigate not only how the executive branch has gathered information on citizens, but have worked with other bodies, including private sector companies, to facilitate action against American citizens. That's the quote. Facilitate action against American citizens. I would have also said to facilitate action against the enumerated rights of the American people in the Bill of Rights and Constitution. Democrats reject accusations from Republicans the federal government has worked with social media companies to censor conservatives, referring to such claims as conspiracy theories. That takes us back to the ridiculous assertion of Pete Aguilar that says that the weaponization of the federal government against Americans subcommittee is the tinfoil hat committee. All right. Let's talk a little bit about that. The cynical hubris of saying that what is plainly evident to anybody with eyes, ears, and a brain is somehow a conspiracy theory is just plain unacceptable, unsatisfactory. That somebody would stand up in front of the American people and say that a subcommittee investigating abuses of power in Washington, D.C. is a tinfoil hat conspiracy committee? Okay, I'll just make it plain. He's a rotten guy. What's he thinking? This is not your government. This is not the Democrat Party's government. This is the government of we the people. Those people were sent to the House of Representatives for a reason by the American people. And those American people are very concerned about the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, the IRS, the Office of National Intelligence, the Department of State, the NSA. They're very concerned about what those people are doing. CIA. Very concerned. There has been an abuse of power. There have been American citizens that have been ruined, jailed because of that abuse of power. Jim Jordan is exactly correct. He's the exact right guy for the job. But I do need to make sure that the Republican Party is fair and equitable when it comes to these committees and their investigations. It's absolutely essential. We sit here at this time in this conversation with probably 2/3 of all the information that was gathered by the January 6th committee still unseen, unheard, unread by the people of the United States. Any exculpatory information that was gathered by the January 6th committee was nowhere to be seen, not discussed. It was a one-sided exercise in a Trump lynching. And that is all that is. That is all that is. And so here we stand with someone elected by the people of the United States in his district saying that that's the tinfoil hat committee. Shame on you, sir. What in the hell are you talking about? If it wasn't for the fact that you sat there inert during the last 2 years, and years before that, by the way, and did nothing about plain abuse of the people of the United States by this government, completely disqualifies you from the hubris of something like a phrase called the tinfoil hat committee. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. There are things that are wrong in these United States. They require investigation. Normally, that's handled by the Department of Justice. Yes, the FBI. And yes, the Department of Homeland Security with their intelligence gathering capability. Those things are plain as the news on your newspaper or the news on this broadcast. And by the way, as we just pointed out, I didn't do it. It was pointed out by, I believe it was Gary Absher, who said, conspiracy theories 37, or actually truth from conspiracies 37 to 0. Yeah. Yeah, these conspiracy theories aren't conspiracy theories. They're charges against a rogue government. Those are not conspiracies. Those are not things to be warded off with tinfoil hats. Once again, that was a mistake. An absolute mistake. It's horrendous. What do you have to say about it? I will be more than happy to share all of that as we continue on this 11th day of January, year of our Lord, 2023. It is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Should Democrats be seated on every committee and every subcommittee? Absolutely. Should it be a knockdown drag-out? Yeah, because that's where we find ourselves in these United States. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Lots of news today. Lots of news to discuss. Talking about what the Republicans are doing in the House with their resolutions and their bills, and even a constitutional amendment. Mike says, okay, let's do something about congressional insider trading. Yeah, we're going to have to do something about that. At some point, we're going to have to do something about the Biden rule. The Biden rule is, if you're a sitting congressman or a sitting senator or a president or vice president, etc., you don't get to you don't get to trade in the markets for the balance of your term in office. Further, I would say that you don't get to trade in the market for 6 months after the end of your term. That's something else. And oh, by the way, they're going to have to do something about family members trading on the names of their representative, senator, executive branch family members. That's going to end up being called the Biden rule. Okay? Poker Monkey in the chat room says, I just read they found more classified documents in the Biden Penn Center. I have not seen that yet, but I will look at it as soon as I can. Regarding term limits and my assertion that the American public can have term limits anytime they want to regarding their voting, Gary Absher says, assuming the voters are smart enough. Also, term limits are necessary because of the quality of citizens these days. We got to be careful of that. It takes all kinds. It's the national motto. E pluribus unum, of many one. If you're in a situation where you live in a terrible district, et cetera, do what many Californians and New Yorkers are doing. Leave. California and New York not only lost seats because Republicans took them over, but they lost seats because people are leaving. The more that happens, as Ronald Reagan used to say, people will vote with their feet, the less power these people will have. Twitter and Facebook both prove the idiot is wearing the tin hat, not the GOP in the public, even though they tried to twist it to some other direction. Gary Absher follows up with, we conspiracy theorists, in quotes, we are critical thinkers, are called race haters, everythingophobe, poopy-faced domestic terrorists. Correct. All of those things. Well, except the poopy face. I don't think that anybody has ever stood up and said, all these people that disagree with us politically are just poopy faces. I don't know. Young people think we send leaders to Washington, D.C. No, we send representatives so we can stay at work. That's the internal working of a republic. We're busy doing other things. What I hope to see sometime before the end of my life is a federal government the people of the United States can turn their back on without fear of some ridiculous idiot saying things like, we've got to get rid of your gas stoves. Yeah, that was just so stupid. Just so stupid. There's a way better chance of these Republican bills being signed into law than passing and ratifying an amendment, any amendment. Correct. That's how these people get rich while in office, that and lobbyists, the insider trading. Term limits for Congress with no access to lobby after term. That's already in place, actually. I think it's 3 years. Shut off the money supply. Gary Absher says, no way the Obama deal bought and maintains a mansion in Martha's Vineyard without having taken money under the table. Yeah, that's a pretty serious assertion. The latest justice already has a book deal. The earlier one can't get published. Correct. Welcome to the media. You're here because that kind of media doesn't exist here. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments as we take you through midweek. It's the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. This broadcast brought to you by pretzel-flavored goldfish from Pepperidge Farm. I tried regular goldfish. They're icky. That's interesting. Gary Absher just reminded me that Nancy Pelosi called President Trump a poopy face. I think I probably just dismissed that, being the father of 4 boys and watching them grow. When somebody's that juvenile, I guess I just write it off. It was daddy hearing. Goes in this ear, goes out this ear. So in point of fact, Pelosi calling President Trump a poopy face, Gary asked me if I remember. So apparently no. Poopy face. It's an idiot. It's ridiculous. Mike says, while they're working on trying to straighten America out, how about this? How about increase the voting age to 21? That's the way it used to be. Then they lowered it to 18 for a very good reason. Do you remember what it was? Do you know why the national voting age is 18? Because 18-year-olds could be drafted. It happened during the Vietnam War. And somebody said something that I don't think anybody can disagree with, and that is this. If you're old enough to fight, you're old enough to vote. And by the way, I think it would probably be a good idea if we do ever institute the draft again. How about this? How about we raise the draft age to 21? Yeah, those two are essential. If you're going to do one, you have to do the other. Of course, the latest bullhawkery, or what is it, bullcorn, as we use one of Ann Hoy Guzman's quotes. The latest bullcorn is to lower the voting age to 16. Seriously? You got to be kidding me. So, when you're starting to talk about the voters getting dumber, aside from the fact that it's really risky to do something like that, to say something like that, because you're talking about the people of the United States, our neighbors, I really don't think that I am capable of bringing up a whole bunch of names of 16-year-olds that are capable of the sober discernment required to vote. We barely let them drive at age 16. I mean, seriously? Yeah, anything for votes for Democrats, I suppose. There you go. Gavin Mealy points out, how about voting for property owners only? That's the way it used to be in the United States, too. That is not going to happen. No. You don't want it to happen either, by the way. No, you want people to vote. But I could see a voting age of 21. I could. As long as the draft age is 21. I mean, those two are inextricably linked, in my view. All right, getting back to the news. I have no idea at this particular moment what is going on in the Biden administration. But I got to be perfectly honest with you. This is just plain stupid. Check this out. The White House's Department of Health and Human Services has extended the COVID-19 state of emergency. These people will not learn. Follow the science, they say. Well, the science says that the vaccines don't work as intended. That the only benefit from the vaccines may be to reduce the level of suffering that you endure when you get COVID-19, which I have had. It was a slight cold. COVID for me was a slight cold. Was that because of the Moderna shots that I took, all 3 of them? I don't know. And unfortunately, nobody else knows. But we keep seeing these vaccine-mandated athletes falling on their face because their heart stops, or ending their careers in a wheelchair with a feeding tube because, for whatever reason, they have a stroke. Somebody's got to do something about that. All I can say is J.D. Biden doesn't know what's going on in the administration. Yes. Yes, I know. I know. Move on. HHS Secretary, Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra announced the decision today via declaration called Renewal of Determination that a Public Health Emergency Exists. Does he not watch 60 Minutes? Did he not see, as opposed to Nazi, did he not see the President of the United States declaring the pandemic was over? Has he not seen the fact that these vaccines that all of us were coerced by the government to take did not protect people from getting COVID, did not prevent transmission? A Pfizer BioNTech executive said that in an inquiry in Europe. Oh no, we didn't test whether or not the vaccines actually stop transmission. Excuse me? Talk about your basic smoking gun. Here is the declaration, quote, as a result of the continued consequences of coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19 pandemic, on this date and after consultation with public health officials as necessary, I, Xavier Becerra, Secretary of Health and Human Services, pursuant to the authority vested in me under Sections 319 of the Public Health Services Act, do hereby renew, effective January 11th, 2023, the January 31st, 2020 determination by former Secretary Alex M. Azar that he previously renewed April 21st, 2020, July 23rd, 2020, October 2nd, 2020, and January 7th, 2021, and that I renewed on April 15th, 2021, July 19th, 2021, October 15th, 2021, January 14th, 2022, April 12th, 2022, July 15th, 2022, and October 13th, 2022, that a public health emergency exists and has existed since January 27th, 2020, nationwide. You know, while we're impeaching Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, might want to look at Becerra because this is incompetence. President Biden said during a television interview September 2022 on 60 Minutes, the COVID-19 pandemic is over. Is the pandemic over? Biden said, the pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're doing a lot of work on it. Biden made the statement during an interview on 60 Minutes, which was his first interview with a news organization in 7 months. And now you know why. If you notice, nobody's wearing a mask. Everybody seems to be in pretty good shape. Yeah. That's when he was walking through the Detroit Auto Show. This after pummeling the people of the United States to buy a $60,000 electric car that only takes 8 hours to refuel. And then in the auto show, walks over to a Corvette Z09 and says, I like this car. They don't have an electric one, Mr. President. You just shot yourself in your rather skinny, drooping fanny. What in the hell is... This is the gang that can't shoot straight. You just don't say anything. You just let the sucker expire and call it a day. That's what you're supposed to do if you have some iota of a clue about what you're doing. Apparently, that's asking too much. The Pentagon, apparently they're listening and learning. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has officially rescinded the military's COVID-19 vaccination mandate for troops after President Joe Biden signed the 2023 National Defense Authorization Act requiring its dismissal. Quote, Section 525 of the NDAA for fiscal year 2023 requires me to rescind the mandate that members of the armed forces be vaccinated against COVID-19, issued in my August 24th, 2021 memorandum. I hereby rescind that memorandum, unquote. The requirement, in case you're wondering, the requirement to remove the mandate was viewed as a win for conservative lawmakers who had long argued that it was hindering the military's recruitment efforts, though Pentagon officials maintained there was no evidence to support the claim. You know what the precedent was for the mandating of COVID-19 vaccinations? The mandating of anthrax vaccinations, which made a whole bunch of people sick. Did they pass out on a football field because their heart stopped? No. Am I saying that Damar Hamlin's difficulties were caused by his shot? No. But what I'm saying is this. What I'm saying is that we have a circumstance where we have problems in the United States military. I spoke to countless members of the United States military while I was deployed down on Operation Lone Star. I was there with them as they tried to stem the onslaught of illegals crossing our border, thanks to the Biden administration. And one of the very important things that they wanted to discuss had to do with these shots. I can't tell you how many brilliant soldiers chose life without the military over taking a shot they didn't agree with for all kinds of reasons. All of those people that said, hey, I don't want to have anything to do with this, were proven right. Because, I'm down there. I'm at one of the various base camps. Actually, both base camps had the problem as COVID-19 flew through that very close, tight community. We were very, very close there. We slept in repurposed semi-tractor trailer units that had, what is the 369? I think 24 bunks in there. We only filled them to 12 because of COVID. But still, COVID-19 went through our camps, both camps, 2 separate times, like a wraith. And these people had taken the vaccine. And the people that didn't take the vaccine, a lot of them didn't get it. The anecdotal information, is way too small to base any kind of serious or official information on. But these soldiers are smart. That's why they're soldiers. And I would say the same thing. Look, I took the shots. I did. Did I feel like I was taking a chance? Yes. Did I agree with the fact that they were being mandated and shoved into my arm against my will? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I said the following: I will absolutely defend your right to refuse these injections. I absolutely will. Because they saw me fight through COVID-19 themselves after I'd gotten 3 shots. Then I told him this: you're going to win this. All these people that you see packing up their stuff and leaving camp, they're going to be restored to duty. They will have their back pay. It will happen. You are going to win. You just have to be patient. Some people took the shot. Hopefully they're still good. And some people walked away. Hopefully they're still good. And hopefully they're back at work. Now look, the one thing about the COVID-19 vaccinations that we must remember is that they were rushed to the marketplace. They were rushed to the marketplace because of the concern over the disease. And so they were rushed in the marketplace and without proper without proper testing. In other words, we had to take the shot before we knew whether it worked or not, to paraphrase a Nancy Pelosi statement. And that was the error. Preparing the vaccines, not a problem. Preparing those vaccines was fine. Forcing them on people was not fine. I took the shot voluntarily because I did it because you needed to have somebody that you could keep an eye on every single day to see what happened. But every single one of us knows somebody that took a shot and is now irrevocably changed. One of them is one of my fellow soldiers in the Texas State Guard. Now, I'm not linking the two. I'm not going to join the tinfoil hat committee. You've got to be kidding me. God, that just annoys the hell out of me. No, I'm not. But sooner or later, somebody's going to be able to figure out whether this works or not, whether this is true or not. And we'll see. We shall see. This is the Wells Report. I'm glad the Department of Defense decided to pull that mandate. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. Just got some sad news. Jeff Beck, the rock guitarist, often regarded among the greatest of all time. Not necessarily by music critics, but by his fellow rock guitar players, has died. This, according to a statement posted on his official social media accounts. He was 78. On behalf of his family, it is with deep and profound sorrow that we share the news of Jeff Beck's passing. After suddenly contracting bacterial meningitis, that'll kill you, he peacefully passed away yesterday. His family asked for privacy while they process this tremendous loss. His representative, Melissa Dragich, confirmed the news to CNN. Beck rose to fame in the 60s when he replaced Eric Clapton in the Yardbirds. He left a year later to start his own group, the Jeff Beck Group, featuring Rod Stewart and Ron Wood. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1992 as a part of the Yardbirds, and then again as a solo artist. An 8-time Grammy winner, Beck earned his first career Grammy in 1985 for Best Rock Instrumental Performance for Escape. He went on to win 5 more times in that category. Last year, Beck toured with Johnny Depp after the pair recorded a cover album together titled 18. In reaction to his death, Kiss bassist and co-frontman Gene Simmons said it was heartbreaking. No one played the guitar like Jeff Beck, Simmons wrote on Twitter. Please get a hold of the first 2 Jeff Beck Group albums and behold greatness. R.I.P. Jeff Beck, dead of bacterial meningitis at age 78. You know, those of us who were kids and following the rock and roll dream would listen to the virtuosity of those amazing players. All of them are in their 70s now. We're going to be reading more of those kinds of pieces of bad news from all of these amazing artists. It's a shame. Talking a little bit about COVID-19. We're going to spend a little more time with it, but before we do that, I want to bring you a cautionary tale. This from USA Today out of El Paso, Texas. A man accused of pointing a gun at migrants trying to stay warm outside an El Paso, Texas church, something else the president didn't see, said allegedly he was doing it for America. Stephen Matthew Driscoll was charged in federal court last Friday with being a felon in possession of a firearm in connection with the New Year's Eve incident outside Sacred Heart Catholic Church in the Segundo barrio. Driscoll's 27 of East El Paso had been at the El Paso County Jail since Thursday after his arrest by El Paso police on state felony charges of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, evading arrest in a vehicle, and misdemeanor disorderly conduct. The federal charge follows an investigation by the FBI and Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, which were working with the police Special Investigations Unit. Driscoll is a convicted felon who was sentenced to 3 years in Texas prison for a 2018 aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and assault of family violence, according to a criminal complaint filed by an FBI agent. So why am I talking to you about this? We know that I normally don't talk about personal misfortune, especially self-inflicted personal misfortune. But one thing I want to make abundantly clear. You may not agree with the fact that our nation has abandoned its responsibility to provide a strong border. I am incredibly upset myself. But those people, 98.5% of them, I would wager, are fine, decent people that are hungry and cold and thirsty. If you're going to point something at them, maybe I would suggest a blanket, a bottle of water. When you're at McDonald's or something like that and you are picking up food for the family or what have you, buy an extra couple of burgers. Find a couple of those people living on the street, because not only did the government of the United States abandon the border, but they also abandoned the people that were invited by the government of the United States to join us illegally. Pass those burgers out. Some hot coffee might be good too. All I can say is this. Those people have been invited to this nation by a malfunctioning government. Our fight is with the government, not with the people. By and large. They're a bunch of jerks too. I mean, they all have them. But what I want, everybody, you can find jerks anywhere. And among this population, you can. But please understand, I am not pro-immigrant. They need to go home. And home isn't the nearest culvert in El Paso. Home is their country. If they want to come to the United States, do it right. But we, the people of the United States, we can't surrender to base impulse. Kindness, correctness. The Constitution speaks for itself, unless you speak for it. Maybe you should do more of that, and less gunplay, or any other kind of thing that you want to do. You're listening to The Wells Report. Back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so there you go. Back in a sec. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. What do we do here? We report the news, honestly and fairly. What we do is we analyze the news for fact and bias, and we point it out when we find it, or them. There is commentary. It's not the news. It's just my opinion, just as valuable as yours, and so we debate. That's the check and balance of everything that comes out of my mouth. If you disagree, if you have a comment, if I left something out, if I got something wrong, by all means, jump on the chat at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, or call me on the telephone, 817-379-2172. If you're watching this on a delayed basis, say, for example, on YouTube or Rumble or Patreon, all you got to do is send me an email. TheWellsReport@frontier.com. The Wells Report, common spelling. The Wells Report at frontier.com. In the subject line, make sure you put the name of the platform where you saw this so I know it's you. All right. So the Supreme Court of the United States has allowed key provisions of a new gun law in New York State to remain in effect for now over objections from gun owners who say the restrictions fly in the face of the Second Amendment. New York Governor Kathy Hochul, a Democrat, signed the law in response to another Supreme Court ruling in June that will make it far easier for many Americans to carry handguns in public. The law bans New Yorkers from carrying guns in certain sensitive places, such as churches, parks, and doctors' offices, thereby making churches, parks, and doctors' offices soft targets for people who prefer weapon-based mayhem. Several gun owners filed an emergency request asking the Supreme Court to temporarily block enforcement of some provisions of the law. The court denied that request today without comment, as is often the case when it comes to the emergency docket. Associate Justice Samuel Alito said in a separate statement that the New York law represents novel and serious questions, and that his understanding is the court's decision did not reflect, listen carefully, the court decision did not reflect any view on the merits of the questions raised by the lawsuit. Quote, applicants should not be deterred by today's order from again seeking relief if the Second Circuit Court of Appeals does not, within a reasonable time, provide an explanation for its stay order or expedite consideration of the appeal. That was, Alito, by the way, was joined in that statement by Associate Justice Clarence Thomas. The outcome of the legislation has national implications because many states are expected to pass or already have on the books similar sensitive place restrictions. The Supreme Court's decision means the law will remain in place while the broader constitutional issues are hashed out in lower federal courts. A U.S. District Court in October blocked significant portions of the law from taking effect, including the sensitive place designation and a provision requiring gun license applicants to demonstrate good moral character. Okay, good moral character according to who? Does anyone know? I'm just asking. Last month, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit reversed course, allowing the law to remain in effect. New York law and others like it are a reaction to a Supreme Court opinion in a major Second Amendment case in June. The High Court 6-3 conservative majority struck down a requirement adopted in a half a dozen Democrat-led states that curbed who may obtain a license to carry a handgun in public. More than that, the court set a new legal standard that has inspired other challenges to gun restrictions under the Second Amendment. That's absolutely true. Now, the one thing that I want to say about this particular law is the mean-spiritedness of it by New York Governor Kathy Hochul. What happened is that she was offended by the Supreme Court decision to rescind a New York law that was clearly anti-constitutional, anti the Second Amendment. And she and her cronies, shall we say, in a peevish attempt to say, oh yeah, pass this law. And the thing about it is once again, the Second Amendment is clear. That right of being able to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. this is an infringement. Therefore, Governor Kathy Hochul and anybody who acted to pass this law is in violation of their oath of office, which clearly states, as they hold their hands up high, clearly states that I will protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. All the while being enemies of the Republic, foreign and domestic. There it is. It's all there for you to see. And so just exactly where does this go now? Well, the Second Court of Appeals has got to figure out what they're going to do with this case. And this is one of those very interesting things that the Supreme Court does. They say, well, the case isn't exactly ripe, they say. Oh, really? Yeah, it's not ripe. In other words, there are more decisions that have to be made. There is more oppression that has to be suffered before cooler heads prevail and the realities of anti-constitutional efforts on the part of legislatures is curbed. Well, that's not good enough. It's not good enough, but it is, however, the law of the land. I'm not going to argue with the Supreme Court on this. There's no need to. But I am arguing with the process that takes so very long for these things to be ripe enough for the Supreme Court to act. Sorry, I have something stuck in my throat. I don't know what it is about today. I got tear gas in my eye, and now I have a rock somehow in my throat. It's annoying. I think I'm hassling with cedar fever. Excuse me. So all this having been said, what are we going to do? We're going to wait. That's what we're going to do. The people of New York have never had more privileges with regard to firearms than they do right now, courtesy of the Supreme Court of the United States. They will act properly on this. They will. But there are a couple of things that I want to point out. One, most of us don't live in New York. This is between the New York voters and the New York government. Yes, it has bled over into the national stage with the Second Circuit Court of Appeals and indeed the Supreme Court of the United States. And do I believe that the Second Circuit Court of Appeals found a way to screw up again? Yes, I do believe they have. Will they be reversed by the Supreme Court? Yes, they will. This is clear. The simple case of the fact is that disarming the public for the sake of the criminal is plain idiocy, in my view. It's just plain idiocy. There was a moment here in Texas where a young, now deceased man walked into a restaurant and pulled out a weapon and started fleecing people of their money. What ended up happening is that a man with a concealed weapons license sitting in the restaurant bided his time. And when this young man with a gun pointed at everyone had his back turned to him, the man leveled his weapon, fired 9 times, and killed that guy. Now, it's regrettable that the young man died trying to, shall we say, rob people of pocket change at gunpoint. But when you use deadly force against people in Texas, somebody's going to use deadly force back. Why is that? It's because they can. They can use deadly force, both in the defense of themselves and defense of others. This man was talked to by the police, and no charges were filed, and so on. And that's the way it ought to be. That's why we don't have a lot of stories like this in Texas. Oh, we have shootings. There's no doubt about it. But the thing about it is that we don't have the rampant gunfire that they have in New York and Chicago and New Orleans. One of the greatest quotes about any of this was by the former Speaker of the House of Representatives. His name was and is the incredibly intelligent Newt Gingrich. He said, if gun control law works, then why doesn't it work? That's a very good question. It doesn't work. What it does is it makes people live in a more dangerous world. Do I believe that everybody in the world ought to be walking around with weapons? No. Just the people who feel that they need to. Do I believe that they should be very, very careful with their weaponry? Absolutely. I constantly talk about train yourself, train yourself, train yourself before you start carrying a weapon. It's not between you and some law in some state or some city. It's between you and you. If you're going to take the responsibility to do that, then you had better know what you're doing. This concealed weapons holder in Texas knew what he was doing. He did. A young man lost his life. It's regrettable. But don't point weapons at anybody in Texas unless you're ready for a gunfight. Should that be the way it is everywhere? Yeah, in my humble opinion, yeah. Yeah, it should be. Because the people of the United States have a right to self-defense. People of the United States have a right to be able to go about their life pursuing happiness without fear of someone trying to kill them or trying to rob them at gunpoint. To feel otherwise is, well, it's anti-American. Is it perfect? No. No, but we don't live in the Star Trek universe where nobody has to worry about robbers. We have to worry about that. We don't live in that same Star Trek universe where people don't have to worry about kidnapping or personal attacks or what have you. We live in the real world. There are bad people about. Those bad people are kept at bay by law. True. Some of them. The others are kept at bay by knowing, like in the state of Texas, that if they do something that stupid, they are probably going to pay a very, very serious price. And so we find ourselves in that situation where these people do indeed have a problem. And they should have a problem. They should be held at bay. Some just break right through it and start doing things that will end their lives. And does somebody get to proclaim that they are the person to end that life? If somebody points a gun at you, yeah, you are. But remember, you get in a gunfight, you're pretty likely to get killed, whether you're on the right side of the decision or the wrong side of the decision. It's not pretty, but it is reality. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. Hi, this is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us. I did something that I really haven't figured out yet. What I figured out was, I think I made a mistake. I think I made another mistake. Anyway, that being said, I made a small little error with my automatic music playing machine. And somehow, without regard to any kind of understanding on my part, managed to turn it off. So I'm running it in manual. I'm asking the guy that knows everything, the great David Maddox, how to fix it. So cross your fingers and we'll see what we can do about making sure this happens. That was a whoopsie. Let's see if it fixes itself. Will it fix itself? No. Annoying. So let's see what's next. Hold on, rejoin one. It should be that right there. Let's see. No, let's just leave it right there and we'll just figure out what we're doing. Yeah. The technical tricks. I mastered Zoom today and had the great Gregg Jarrett of Fox News on. And now I'm paying for it because nothing in the universe is without balance. That's truly annoying. By the way, while we're talking about weapons and while we're talking about all this, I would say that in this day and age, what we should do is we should find ourselves in a situation where we carry one of two things, either a weapon or a first aid kit. It's my hope that the first aid kit prevails more than the weapons, but I do happen to believe that we have to make hard decisions in this world, and sadly, that might be one of them. And so that being said, all we can do is the best we can do. Going to the chat room here. Let's see what else is going on. Let's see. Great show. Everybody have a good evening. Somebody tell him that the show is over. Oh. Okay. Did somebody... Is that why the machine's not working? I just realized it was 17:20. Gris Grimes. Somebody tell him the show is done for the day. Seems like DC historically has never been concerned with the southern border. Yeah, I hope you're well. I think the lobbying is protected under the First Amendment. Yeah, that's true. I'm just going through all of this kind of stuff. The report after dark. Yeah, okay. I screwed this up. No, I didn't realize it was over. Okay, so that explains it. Oops. Okay. I have more editing to do. Some days are diamonds. Some days are stone. Which do you think this is? Chris, thank you. Mike, thank you. Dave the Barbarian, yes, Mike, I do realize it's after 5 o'clock. It is the Wells Report. Yeah, I know. The big old clock. Yeah. Nobody here on this chat room is funny. Okay. So there you go. JD needs overtime. Keep going. No, I'm not going to keep going. Let's see if there's anything that you can't live without here. We talked about COVID. We talked about the weapons. We'll talk about the sports things. By the way, there is something else. While we have a moment here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do stop laughing at me. I'm going to go ahead and do this last thing here because it's really, really cool. Okay. That's this. Since we have a little extra time here, that's one of the cool things about this broadcast. I don't have to stop if I don't want to, even though this is just buffoonery on my part. That's the way it works. So the good news of the day. Let's have a good news of the day. Off we go. The Buffalo Bills safety, Damar Hamlin, is going home. He went into cardiac arrest, was resuscitated on the field during a January 2nd game against the Cincinnati Bengals. He completed what doctors have called a remarkable recovery with his release from the hospital, which happened today. Damar Hamlin is at home. With every update on his condition drawing intense national attention, Hamlin spent a week in intensive care at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center before being transferred to Buffalo General Medical Center on January 9th. We've completed a series of tests and evaluations in consultation with team physicians. We are confident DeMar can safely be discharged to continue his rehabilitation at home and with the Bills, according to critical care physician Dr. Jamie Nadler, in a statement released by the team. The 24-year-old defensive back collapsed to the turf after making what appeared to be a routine tackle on Bengals receiver T. Higgins in the first quarter of the Monday night game. Medical personnel at the game were able to revive him and quickly get him from Paycor Stadium to the nearby UC Medical Center, University of Cincinnati, saving precious time and perhaps his life in the process. Hamlin has continued to praise his doctors and hospital staff involved with his recovery while also acknowledging the outpouring of prayers and support from fans all across the country. His GoFundMe page to raise money for his Chasing M's Foundation Community Toy Drive has received more than $8.6 million in donations. DeMar Hamlin, he's at home. God bless him. God bless the Bills. God bless the people that saved his life. There you go. A little bit. Let's see. I wonder. Should I go ahead and play some music? Should I do that? I think I can do that. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that. Everybody's laughing at me. When I said some days are diamonds and some days are stone, Gary says it's a diamond. Good show. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a good show. You know, I was sitting here in the middle of the show and I was thinking to myself, let's see, is this the third hour or is this the second hour? Is this the third hour? Second hour. Chris Grimes said he's only alive because of the large medical presence at NFL games. Without that help, commotio cordis will usually kill a person in a very short time, which is what happens to youth who have died from this. You're absolutely right, Chris. By the way, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us again. Thanks for being a part of the broadcast. All right, so there you go. The Wells Report plus 25. I need a drink. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Nobody has any idea when. Until then, God bless. Have yourself a great day.